Hey Internet, how's it going? I'm Scott Brio. Welcome to my channel. I have today a very exciting product here. It's the SSL 2 Plus by Solid State Logic. Solid State Logic has traditionally been a large format recording console company, and their products have been largely outside of your bedroom producer's budget. Now, SSL has done a smart thing here by releasing a small 2-channel interface, basically allowing your average bedroom producer to be able to get that SSL sound in their bedroom studio. So we'll be recording through the 2 Plus as well as my Scarlet18i20 with a SM57, a Rode NT1-A, and then of course with my Yamaha SE700 drum machine, getting some loops and kind of hearing how it sounds through the various interfaces. We'll also be recording without the 4K mode, seeing if we can replicate the 4K mode with plugins. I've got a couple different plugins that will add some kind of high-end sheen and brilliance, and I'm curious to know if they can be replicated with plugins and not having to pay for this. Now, I will say this is a very competitively priced device at around $280 for the 2 Plus. I mean, you know, it might be nice just to buy it and be able to switch that 4K mode on and have that on your recordings and not have to worry about extra plugins. So stay tuned. I will be using the audio tests with the microphones as a shameless plug for my podcast. I do a podcast called The Voice of Electronic Music, which is essentially a music industry podcast where every week I talk to music producers and DJs and promoters and party planners and festival throwers and all that about what it is they do and what excites them and how they got to where they are. So if that interests you, check that out. That's on my channel in a playlist. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that notification button down below so that you'll be notified of upcoming videos. Anyway, stay tuned. We've got the latency test coming up, the interface and mic shootout. Thanks again, and stick around for all the upcoming tests. We are now going to do an unboxing video of this thing. I've had it for almost a week and a half now and have not opened it just because I wanted to find the time to do an unboxing video for you guys. So stay tuned. See you guys. All right, so here we go. Unboxing of the Solid State Logic 2 Plus. Let's see what we got inside here. Oh, so exciting. I'm waiting a long week and a half for this. Wow. Oh, looks great. Here we go. It's in standard packaging. Pop this open. Instruction manual. Wow. Looks really good. Looks really, really good. Nice, chunky monitor level knob. Wow, that feels great. Really, really, really impressive. Yeah, they actually just feel like the regular SSL knobs. This one is especially nice, you know, if you're used to the API consoles and stuff. I'm sure you really appreciate the larger chunky knob here. And I do appreciate that the monitor level volume goes to 11. That's a great little inside joke there. So, wow, okay, yeah, you've got a USB-C cable here, as well as a USB to USB-C cable that goes in there in the back, I'm sure. Yeah, right there. You've got standard MIDI in and out. You've got dual headphones, which is super nice. That's a great thing that they've included there. You've got your phono outputs, as well as your 1/4 inch, and your combo jack XLR inputs. On the front here, you've got 48 phantom power. You've got your line and high Z functions, and a nice little LED. I appreciate this multi-stage LED more than just the single LED that changes from green to yellow to red. Just a nice little added bit of input. And then you've got on the monitor mix over here, you've got your stereo button with the input and USB. These monitor mix knobs are not my favorite, you know, having to blend between input and USB output, but guess it is what it is. The phones A and B, and you've got an option to send it to 3 and 4 outputs, which is nice as well for your monitor mixes and that sort of thing. So there it is, there you have it. There's the unboxing, and now we will get on to the tests and the shootout. All right, hey guys. Oh wow, that was a good amount of effort put forth getting both the SSL 2 Plus into OBS Studio and also my DAW. I don't know if any of you have tried doing that, but it's quite harrowing. Anyway, without further ado, I wanted to talk about the latency between the SSL 2 Plus and my Focusrite 18i20. So I used RTL Utility to do some testing on the latency difference between the two interfaces, and I'll show you that in a second. But what I found interesting was when I switched the audio interfaces in Ableton Live, the Focusrite came up here as usual. And then when I switched over to the SSL 2 Plus, the first thing I noticed was the 18i20 has significantly more latency than the SSL 2 Plus. The SSL 2 Plus has roughly 6 milliseconds less incoming latency, and the output has roughly 20 milliseconds less on outgoing latency, which is very interesting. And the overall latency difference between the two, with the 18i20 here, you can see it's 55 milliseconds, and on the SSL 2 Plus, it's 27.7 milliseconds, which is roughly a 28 millisecond difference in latency between the two. Now, sound of the interfaces aside, latency alone is a pretty big deal when you're recording, as far as monitoring your input as you're recording, and output latency, I don't know that it matters quite as much as input latency, but the overall latency, I mean, that's a pretty big difference, right? 20 milliseconds is enough to audibly be different. So I'm going to bring up the overall latency test for the SSL 2 Plus. And of course, there's a lot to read here. I will be uploading this to both the description and a file you can download in the YouTube description. And, you know, honestly, I think that this will probably be more helpful for some of you hyper-analytical people out there. The overall test that I saw in Ableton Live is enough to convince me. And, you know, some of these I was getting couldn't reliably detect input signal. And that I think had a lot to do with the fact that I was getting really high up there into the sample rate. And I'm not super familiar with RTL Utility, but it was giving me this after multiple attempts. So I think past 196K, it just wasn't working. But there's the tests. You'll be able to download that. And let's get into the audio side of things here. So what I did here is I recorded various microphones through my various preamps. The Rode NT1-A, which is what you're hearing right here, through my Pre73, an SM57 through the Pre73, the Rode NT1-A through my Scarlett, which is the interface that I've been using for the last couple of years. You can ignore these because I actually ended up not being able to get a hold of the Moto M2. And then the Rode NT1-A through the SSL 2 Plus, SM57 through the SSL 2 Plus, SM57 through the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode engaged, and the Rode NT1-A through SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode engaged. Oh, it's a tongue twister. And then also on top of that, I used my trusty SU700 drum machine sampler and recorded some loops. And the first loops are just going into the SSL 2 Plus. Second group here is going into the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode engaged. And the third group here is the SU700 going into the 18i20. Now, I did do the best that I could as far as using a visual meter and audibly testing for volume differences here between the three. The 4K mode on the SSL 2 Plus did seem to give a 1 or 2 decibel bump in audio volume, so I compensated for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play back all of these. You are going to want to download these yourself and pop them into your DAW and listen to them for yourself. You know, go back and forth, solo between them, and see if you can hear the difference yourself. I heard a pretty noticeable difference, most notably between the 18i20 and the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode. The difference between the 18i20 and the SSL 2 Plus was not staggering, and the difference between the SSL 2 Plus and SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode is also very subtle. I heard the biggest difference between the 2 Plus with 4K mode and the 18i20. And I'm going to get into my thoughts on what I think about the overall sound between the two interfaces in a little bit here. So let's just go ahead and play these back. This is the Rode NT1-A through the Pre73, and I'm just going to play these once because you're going to download them and listen to them anyway, but you'll be able to jump back and forth between them. This is the Rode NT1-A into the Golden Age Pre73. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. This is the Shure SM57 into the Golden Age Pre73. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. This is the Rode NT1-A into the Scarlet18i20. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. This is the Shure SM57 going into the Scarlet18i20. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. This is the Rode NT1-A into the SSL 2 Plus. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. This is the Shure SM57 into the SSL 2 Plus. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. This is the Shure SM57 into the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. This is the Rode NT1-A into the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode. Check out my music industry podcast, The Voice of Electronic Music, in the playlist on my channel. And now I'm going to bounce back and forth between the Rode NT1-A into the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode versus the Rode NT1-A into my Scarlet18i20. And we'll see if we can hear a difference here. Let's play the 18i20 first. This is the Rode NT1-A into the Scarlet18i20. This is the Rode NT1-A into the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode. This is the Rode NT1-A into the Scarlet18i20. This is the Rode NT1-A into the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode. So it's a very subtle difference, and what I think the 4K mode is doing on the SSL 2 Plus is, at first I thought it was going to be kind of a mid-high boost like some plugins do. They'll add kind of a high shelf that kind of give this high-end brilliance and sparkle. But after listening to it and testing it, I think what they're doing here, because SSL did say that it is a hardware feature and not a software feature. And so what I think the 4K mode is doing is adding harmonics kind of across the board to your sounds. And the reason why I think that is because once I loaded the loops in for my SU700, I noticed that there was kind of a soft pillowiness to the kick drum. There was a cohesiveness that was happening between my percussion that was not happening with the 18i20. And it also wasn't quite happening with the SSL 2 Plus without 4K mode. And so that tells me that the 4K mode is kind of adding some harmonics and smearing things a little bit. I thought that the kick drum was actually coming in quieter on the SSL 2 Plus with 4K mode. It was actually just sitting in the mix better than it was with the 18i20. So let's go ahead and listen to some of the loops. Again, this is just a super simple loop I came up with in 10 minutes. The goal here is to be able to hear the difference between the various drum sounds and the synth loop, and you'll be able to judge for yourself. And I'm not going to play back every single stem of this. That's kind of pointless. It's more beneficial for you as a listener to download the files and pop them into your DAW yourself. I mean, you're going to hear a little bit of the YouTube compression through this recording. So really, I can't recommend enough downloading the files and listening for yourself. So here we go. This is the SU700 loops through the SSL 2 Plus. Alright, so now that we've got all of our loops listened to here, I've got the 18i20 loops, and on those I have added a Pre73 as well as a True Iron, both great plugins, both fairly subtle with the exception of the Pre73. Once you start cranking it over here, you can really start to hear the high get sharp and kind of brittle. but it does add a really nice effect just a couple decibels up. And honestly, you know, trying to replicate the SSL 4K mode, I found that the blend of both of these seemed to do the most. And you know, I still don't think that it came close. Well, I mean, it's close-ish to the 4K mode, but the 4K mode is really adding a lot of three-dimensionality there that you're not getting with the plugins. With the plugins, you're getting kind of this like EQ curve and you know, a bit of a transistor sound, but you know, it kind of seems like a band-aid or like, you know, putting a sticker on something, whereas the 4K mode, I'm just hearing a lot more depth in there. So let's hear the 18920 loops, and then I'm gonna bring it up to the SSL in 4K mode, and then back down to the 18920, but with the plugins on. So we can hear the difference here. And you know, what I'm hearing is just a bit more crunchiness in the 18920 stuff, which doesn't sound bad. It just doesn't sound quite as good as the SSL 2 Plus in 4K mode. And so let me show you just what these are exactly doing. So I've just got the Pre73 turned up a little bit, and I have the True Iron pretty much maxed out on the crush and the strength. And I've got morph mode on here. But True Iron is a very, very subtle plugin. So I'm going to go ahead and play this back, and I will turn off the effects for now, and then I'll switch them on halfway through, and you can hear just what they're doing. So, you know, it's subtle, but that's kind of what the 4K mode is. The 4K mode is subtle. And so, you know, I would suggest that you, when you download these and you pop them into your own DAW, see if you can replicate the sound of the 4K. This is as close as I could get, so I thought it was a pretty good try. But, you know, I think I prefer the sound of the SSL with the 4K mode. It just sounds good. It just sounds three-dimensional and clear. There's no noise, so it's really, you know, it's kind of at 280, it's kind of a no-brainer. So there you have it. Go ahead and listen to those back to back, and you can kind of judge for yourself. I'm going to have my final thoughts coming up next here on the unit and the comparison, but all the downloads are in the description of the video. So I'll see you in a second here for my final thoughts on the whole Shootout. All right, so final thoughts on the SSL 2 Plus. I was going to buy this thing, and I wanted to see how it sounded. I wanted to see what SSL could do with a 2-channel interface. I wanted to see if the magic was there with something as small as a 2-channel interface. And you know, comparing the multi-track files to my 18920, I really did hear a bit of that SSL magic imparted on the recordings, especially with the 4K mode. And so, you know, in 5-10 years, I'd like to be able to look back at my recordings and know that they went through those SSL preamps with those added bit of harmonics. What I heard from the recordings were a bit of smearing and gelling across the mix that made everything sit a little bit better together. The 18920 was a little bit more obvious. The kick drum and some of the other elements just kind of sat up in front, kind of like your standard digital mix. But with the 4K mode engaged, it kind of made it sound a little bit more analog. So let me know what you think of the SSL 2 Plus in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can be notified of upcoming videos. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.